Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Wow, we have so many more listeners joining us now on our daily travels, listening to this daily tech podcast. And I wanted to give each and every one of you a warm welcome, because we're all just a bunch of people listening all over the world on our commute, the gym visit, the dog walk, and even doing our household chores. But remember, I want to know where you listen to this tech podcast. So please send over where you like to listen, what you see when you listen, so I can see the world through your eyes too. Now, I recently read how a company called Interana recently released a new version of its big data analytics platform for behavioural discovery and analysis. And essentially, Interana can analyse trillions of raw time series data points in just 1 to 2 seconds. And there's no need to work with a data scientist to extract or transform that data. And ordinary business users can ask question after question, getting answers about their customer behaviour, but in real time. And this is where things get interesting, because the platform was built by co-founder and CTO Bobby Johnson, who also headed up development of analytics tool at Facebook, including Scuba many moons ago. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way back to the US so we can speak with CTO Bobby Johnson, who's going to tell us all about Interana and their big reveal recently about the world's most advanced platform for behavioural discovery and analysis. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Bobby. Can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my background is I used to work at Facebook. I was the head of infrastructure there from sort of a few million users up to 1 billion. So did a lot of work on scaling there. And then a few years ago left to start Interana, which is the company I'm working on now, where we do behavioral discovery and analytics. And what we mean by that is sort of taking what we call event data. So this is anything that happens with a timestamp. So this could be a click or a swipe on a website. It could be a call to a call center. It could be a transaction, or often it's a mix of those things. And we pull that all together, and we're able to let you look at how people are behaving or how devices are behaving in that data. So things like, what do people do before they churn? Where are people getting stuck in this onboarding flow? So things that have to do with sequences of events. We're able to pull in, this data is often very large, we're able to pull it in sort of at massive scale, and then make those kinds of really valuable business questions accessible to everybody, not just data scientists, not just people who code. There's a visual interface where you can go explore through and find out, how people are interacting with your product or your service.
Wow, what a great history you've got there. There's not many people, I would imagine, that could say they've gone from scaling 1 million to 1 billion users like that. So I've got to ask, can you tell me more about your backstory from leading the development of analytics tools at Facebook, including Scuba, of course, which is Facebook's internal data analytics platform, to then going on to your time at Interana and the kind of problems that you set out to solve for your clients?
Yeah, so it was, we obviously learned a lot about just sort of the mechanics of how you deal with data at the scale, how you make it fast, how you make it manageable. But the other thing that was really interesting that we learned along the way was, seeing how people actually use this data to solve like real business problems. And the thing that was neat about Facebook is that we really did have almost everybody in the company was able to use data and base their decisions on that. And so we got to see over the years, how, mapping. And so when you have a business question, it usually starts out pretty vague. There's this thing I don't understand, or I want to get this number to go up, or I don't understand why this isn't working as well as it should. And so getting to see how, sort of going from those kind of questions into, this is a specific set of analytic questions I'm going to ask in order to get my answer. And so we had, by the time I left Facebook, we had more than half the employees were active users of analytics tools. We learned a lot about how you make those things accessible so people can start with their broad questions and narrow down to finding an answer to something that they can actually do something about. Okay, I have a problem in this particular stage of this process, or, this group of people isn't working, and so I need to change something about how I either message them or something on my product. So it was a lot of just over the years sitting with people who had real pressing questions and figuring out how can we make the tool actually serve them.
Now, Interana also recently released a new version of its big data analytics platform for behavioral discovery and analysis. So can you tell me more about how it can analyze trillions of raw time series data points in just 1 to 2 seconds? And also how there's actually no need to work with a data scientist to extract or transform that data?
So the thing about event data and behavior is this data is really big. And it's one of the things a lot of big data is really time series data, because, rather than having, if you have 10 million users on your app, 10 million things isn't a big number, but if those people are clicking 1,000 times a day, that ends up being a really big number. And so it's, really important that we're able to ingest that, all of it, and then let you look across it. Because the other thing you find with behavior is that you don't know beforehand what's going to be interesting. So you can't just sort of say, oh, I'm going to summarize this. If I can count, how many times people clicked on a mobile app, but that's not useful. What I want to know is that when they went through these 3 steps, it turned out well. And when the second step was different, it was much less likely to work. And you've got to, and you don't know that coming in. So a really important part of the platform is that we're able to ingest this. We have customers doing billions of events a day, even as much as 1 billion an hour coming in. And then we let somebody scan across, query across that whole thing in a completely ad hoc way to say, to ask about whatever behavior they want. And then it's also really important that interface to that is visual. So you ask a lot of questions because, again, you don't really know what you're looking for when you start. It's a series of iterative questions that leads you to what you're looking for. And if you have to stop and either, write a program or write a SQL query or go talk to somebody else who can do that, you might get a couple questions a day answered, whereas we want people, sitting down in a session and asking dozens of questions.
And it seems to me that its really big appeal is going to be that ordinary business owners can finally ask question after question, get the answers that they need about customer behavior in real time without having to secure the time of a techie who could get back to you a week on Tuesday. But can you offer any examples of how it would work in a real world scenario for any business leaders that are listening?
Yeah. So it's really critical that when somebody is sitting down and asking the question, that they don't hit a wall where they have to stop and go back and talk to a data person. So a lot of people have the experience, you get the first couple questions answered and you're like almost to the answer you need, but the data's not there. It's not prepped right. You don't have access to it. And so you've got to go talk to somebody else. So as a really concrete example, one of our customers is Sonos that makes internet connected speakers. And they live and die by how easy it is to set the thing up. And it's kind of complicated because you've got to get the device on the Wi-Fi. You've got to connect to a third-party music service. You've got to connect a controller app on your phone. And sort of between all of these, there's different places where people get stuck. And so at Sonos, it's both people working in the product development as well as people working in customer support are able to go in and, in very, detailed way, debug where people getting stuck in this flow. And again, it's, sort of dozens of users there who will go in and ask, dozens of questions in a session to find out, what is it about this step of the process that we're losing more people than we think we should. And they've been able to, dramatically reduce the rate of people returning their speakers. And I think most people who buy a Sonos product now are usually delighted with how smoothly the process goes. And that really comes from that day in, day out, asking detailed questions about where there are problems in the process.
Now, I've just returned from the Adobe Summit, and there is so much excitement about behavioral discovery and analysis tools right now. So what is it that makes Interana actually stand out from the crowd? And what do you think is so powerful about the Interana V3?
So one of the things that's most important for us standing out is we're able to handle very large scale at speed. So as I mentioned, this data often is really big. And sort of one way you can deal with it being big is you throw away some of it or you summarize it on the way in. And, that can give you sort of a chart of, these are two kind of most important funnels for conversion or whatever, but the real magic is in all of the detail that leads, what things happen before or after or between this. And so what's really important for us is that we have every event that happened, we store in our system and is immediately available to query. And that's, the thing. And so the scale is important, but even if you're running at sort of a modest scale, the amount of data that comes in for events can be quite large very quickly. And so actually making that accessible is really the key. And then, the second part of that is having these visual tools so that you don't have to have programmers writing the queries. You can have just everybody in the organization. And that's, it's the, business people running a business understand a huge amount of context. And when you have to, communicate that to a separate group that does the data and then communicate the answers back, you lose a lot of the richness of, sort of just the context, the understanding of what these numbers actually mean to the business and what's important and what isn't.
And just for everyone listening, to help them visualize how it will work in their world or in the real world and online, can you tell me more about how sports media giant Bleacher Report, a division of the Trana Broadcasting, relies on Interana, just to help them understand the behavior of its users and to inform app development and content optimization decisions?
Yeah, so they live and die by how sticky their application is. Whether you download the app and a lot of people come back every day, some people don't. And they sort of started with the question of why is that happening? And it wasn't clear what's different about the people that are, long-term valuable users versus ones that download it and toss it. And so it's, they were able to look at what are the actions that people take before becoming long-term users versus churning. And it turns out there's actually a lot of subtle things about, what happens, the very first hour you're on the app, your very first session, or your first day or your first week, that has a huge effect on, 10, 12 weeks down the line of whether you're still using the app. So they found things like, certain kinds of subscriptions and certain kinds of, interacting with certain kinds of content was dramatically better for the long-term retention. So they were able to go back and revamp their onboarding experience to encourage people to do those things that cost them the stick. And they were able to dramatically improve I think it was something like 60% improvement on their engagement metrics. The other thing they look at is, they're sort of constantly running new content and understanding what content's working, and kind of more importantly, what kind of content is working for what kinds of users. They're able to get immediate feedback there. So their editorial team uses this heavily to decide what kinds of things they should be focused on.
Now, I also read a great quote from you recently where you spoke about how companies such as Microsoft, Comcast, Uber, Sonos, Edmunds, Goodyear, and so many more are all using Interana for all kinds of applications, including customer behavioral analytics, content optimization, and product innovation. And they're all seeing similar benefits. So can you expand on that and help listeners understand how much value you can provide some of the biggest brands in the world, who are essentially all from multiple industries, aren't they?
Yeah, so across all these industries, the thing we're seeing is that, almost every business now is at least somewhat online. And as, there's increasing sort of mix of, digital, web and mobile interaction, as well as real world, either retail locations, service calls, things like that. That means that the customer experience flow is complicated. You have people bouncing between channels. You have people with many touch points and many, many interactions. And so being able to understand that is really important. And most people don't have nearly as good a window into that as they should. About, often they'll sort of know, okay, within the call center, we've got some metrics, and sort of within our, our service department, we have some metrics, but they don't know things like this is the web mobile behavior that leads to successful call center interactions. There's the call center interactions that leads to successful, service visits. So, getting that 360-degree view of how customers are interacting with your service or your experience is, increasingly valuable to everybody. And it's sort of, if you look at the big web companies, a lot of why they've been really successful is that they understand that really well. And they sort of have it easier to start because everything happens on their platform. But as you move into other businesses, getting that same kind of visibility into where customers are succeeding and failing is really valuable.
And are you noticing any other big trends in companies wanting to base decisions on data and insight rather than that traditional method of instinct and intuition?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is that all of a sudden a lot more data is available, sort of between the big parts of businesses moving online, as well as offline things are increasingly well measured. I mean, with the IoT world, we're sort of just seeing the beginning of this, but pretty soon we're going to understand, a real world retail interaction just as well as we understand the website. And so, these sorts of analysis have been so valuable online are now becoming available to people in other kinds of businesses. And, I think it's pretty quickly shifting from this being something that sort of seems like a nice to have to something that's going to be the expectation that sort of anybody working in a business, if you have interactions you can measure, you're going to need to look at them or you're going to get, beaten by competition who is looking at it.
And of course, Interana V3 has only recently been released, but what is the most exciting aspects of it as far as you're concerned?
So it's basically a culmination of a lot of things we learned over years of working with customers. So we've kind of revamped the whole user interface to make it even more sort of straightforward and accessible. So one of the things about when we're talking about behavior, there aren't a lot of tools that do this. And so, over the years, we've tried a lot of different things for how users express the questions, how they understand the results, how we visualize them. And so we really honed in on, a really straightforward, sort of accessible way for somebody who's new to this to walk in and immediately kind of be able to ask these questions about how people are flowing through the product. So there's some new visualizations, a lot of new kind of direct interactions where you can see a big flow chart of how everybody moved through my my experience, and I could just click right in it and zoom in on that part. And, it's really natural and flows really well. The second part is we've improved the performance quite a bit. And so, this data keeps getting bigger and I think this version's at least twice as fast as the last one. And again, that's, if you get an answer back in a couple seconds, that's what's really great because you just keep clicking into the UI. You keep digging in deeper until you find what you want.
So what's next for Interana? I mean, like you said, that data is going to continue to grow at an exponential rate, and you probably can't share too much, but is there anything else that really interests you or that you can share with us today about the future for you guys?
Well, part of it is sort of the immediate future is as we're launching V3, get it into lots of people's hands, and there's going to be a lot of iterating as we get feedback on that. We've also been looking at folding in some machine learning to sort of help guide the user to what's interesting in the data. And we sort of, and when we think about that, it's, we're still very big believers that it's the human. Somebody running a business understands how the business works. They understand things about their users and their context. But we're sort of constantly looking for ways that we can have the computer sort of augment that and surface things that are going to be interesting to that business person.
Fantastic. Well, a huge thank you for joining me on the show today. Before I do let you go, could you just remind the listeners of where they can find you online and read about your use cases and maybe just reach out and contact a member of your team if they do have any additional questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Our website is interana.com. That's INTERANA. It stands for Interactive Analytics. So yeah, if you come to our website, you can read a lot more about our use cases and our product.
It seems that everywhere we look at the moment, everything is data-driven and people want a lot of answers and they want them quickly, almost in real time a lot of the time. And what I love about what you guys are doing here is how business owners will finally be able to ask the question after question and get answers about their customer behavior in that real time, but without having to search for the techie and book their time and get that information that they need. And I think that's so important. But more than anything, just a big thank you for coming on and sharing that story with me today.
Well, thank you very much.
Interana's advanced platform for behavioural discovery analysis really fascinated me, especially because how it allows organisations to easily gain those real-time insights into their customers' products and operations. But the real exciting part, for me at least, was combining unprecedented speed and scalability with unparalleled ease of use. That alone is a huge win. But enough of my thoughts. This show isn't just about me waxing lyrical or spouting my thoughts and opinions. I want to hear yours too. I want to hear your different opinions and your unique experiences too. So remember, you can email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You get me on Twitter or Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. And even, I think LinkedIn's Neil C. Hughes as well. I'm the easiest guy in the world to find online. So I will join you again, same time, same place tomorrow. But all that's left for me to say is a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.